The Auditor's Authority is very clear in the city charter. That authority is the highest authority because that comes from the people in Denver. It's really the people of Denver saying that you have the authority to conduct these kinds of audits.
It took us a year to get access to Denver County Court after a challenge from the presiding judge. Eventually, we were able to assert the Auditors Authority according to the charter. Our audit of Denver County Court was important because it found flaws in the court's administration that led to thousands of cases being closed incorrectly.
The Auditor's Authority is very clear in the city charter. That authority is the highest authority because that comes from the people in Denver. It's not an ordinance passed by the council. It's not an executive order issued by the mayor. It's really the people of Denver saying that you have the authority to conduct these kinds of audits. Yeah, since taking office in 2015, a number of times I've had agencies challenge the Auditor's Authority to conduct an audit of their department or their agency. The Denver County Court is really the most recent one that challenged our authority to conduct an audit. The scope of the work that we were doing was not getting into areas of what I would call judicial discretion. In other words, we were not going to be second-guessing why a judge levied a fine or didn't levy a fine. But what we did look at were the documentation for the cases. So we had about 4,000 cases that were closed in error. Another 300 cases that were closed prematurely had to be reopened. That's a symptom of a bigger problem, which is really how are you managing these cases from cradle to grave, so to speak.
We found several case files with missing documentation of key courtroom actions, including the suspension of fines and penalties, the cancellation and reinstatement of a protection order, and defendants' acknowledgments of the terms of probation.
Another area where we found some problems were there's a lack of segregation of duties and how cash and checks are handled. We have the same people doing conflicting duties, if you will. We made the recommendation that these duties be separated. I know the court did not agree with that. They felt there was a budgetary problem there. But I do think the budgetary process in Denver would allow for them to be able to address this issue. The zoo, for example, challenged our authority to conduct an audit. They had never been audited, to my knowledge, by the Denver auditor. Again, I think it's fairly clear in the cooperative arrangement between the zoo and the city and county of Denver that the auditor has that kind of authority. Eventually, we were able to gain access and conduct an audit. I thought the audit was well received by the zoo. Their actual compliance with the recommendations that we made was very good. The court felt that their current policies and procedures were adequate to mitigate the kind of risks that we were talking about. And we strongly disagree with that statement, so much that we wrote an addendum to the audit report, which is not rare, but it's not a normal occurrence for us to really write an addendum, really re-emphasizing that their current policies and procedures do not mitigate the kind of risks that we were talking about.
We make recommendations to mitigate risks. If the court does not address those risks, it could threaten the achievement of the court's organizational goals.
Well, I'm disappointed that the court responded the way they did on certain recommendations. But I think my job is still to report to the public, what we think the operations are doing. We will follow up on all the audit recommendations. It's possible that the court could change their mind and actually put new policies and procedures in place, but we won't know that until we follow up on the rest of the audit report. Okay, well that's it for this episode of Ask the Auditor. And if you have a question that you'd like to ask the auditor, you can send it to auditor@denvergov.org. And maybe your question will be the next question that we answer on the next episode of Ask the Auditor.